reconstruct from all the tiny fragments which littered the floor of the tomb. Today, all the remaining pieces from the chamber are stored in the conservation lab at Vergina, awaiting reconstruction. They have been spread out in their thousands, exactly as they were found in the tomb. They are even kept in layers, on top of each other, in the way they originally fell to the floor. Made of ivory, bronze, glass and gold, the fragments fit together, somehow, into the furnishings which adorned the tomb. Tiny golden figures from Greek mythology decorated the wooden funeral couch. Other lifelike figures with ivory heads were also attached to the couch. Could these be the dead man and his family? All the artifacts clearly showed that the tomb belonged to a powerful and wealthy warrior. But this symbol said something more, for it was the starburst, emblem of the Macedonian kings. For Andronikos, that meant one dramatic possibility. Might this be the tomb of Macedonia's great king, Philip II? Could the contents of the tomb provide any further clues?
In the tomb we found some ivory heads. Amongst them was one which I thought that was the portrait of Philip, because the right eye of this ivory head was a blind eye, and we knew that Philip was blind in his right eye. But I had another argument. The likeness with the gold medallion from Tassos, well known, was very great.
Philip II, whom the Athenians reviled as the chief of a barbarian tribe until he came to dominate the whole of Greece, and whose son Alexander the Great set off to conquer the Persian Empire, spreading Macedonian power to the edges of the known world. Another clue was found on the mural, which shows a group of hunters, among whom are two distinguished riders. The whole painting has been recreated by Yorgos Miltsakakis.
My opinion is that the central horseman, which is between the two trees, is Alexander the Great. And when we found, I thought that this could be the dead. But as we understood that the dead was not a young man, but a mature man, I realized that the dead was the other horseman, which is not very obvious now because of the damages, and I distinguished in his face the face of Philip. The date of the artifacts found in this tomb and out of this tomb were dated in the third quarter of the 4th century. That means 350 to 325 BC. We knew that during this period only one king was dead and buried. Then, if the date was correct, and to my opinion, and according to the opinion of all archaeologists, I think, is correct, the only candidate was Philip.
But it was the bones taken from the Larnax that provided the most graphic proof for the final identification. And this was made possible through the efforts of a British team of physical anthropologists who analysed and reconstructed the face of the dead king.
When we were examining the skull, the face and the jaws, we observed, first of all, a nick out of the upper border of the right eye socket, and we also observed asymmetries between the upper and lower jaws on right and left sides, which may indeed fit in with the injuries that Philip received 18 years before his death at the siege of Macedonia in 354, when an arrow fired from the wall removed his right eye.
Despite such terrible mutilation, Philip lived on to fight more foreign wars and expand his empire. Until here, just outside his palace, in the theatre uncovered by Andronikos in 1982, he was murdered by an enemy from within. It was dawn on a day of celebration. The people of Aegea pressed into the theatre. But as Philip entered, he was struck down. His murderer was killed as he fled to his horses.
Something we know is that after the death of Philip, Alexander was proclaimed, probably here in this theater, King of Macedons. So from here starts the period of Hellenistic civilization, let us say, the expedition of Alexander, something which changed the world, we can say.
Alexander's reign began with bloody retribution. There was little solid evidence to implicate the dead assassin in a plot, but there were enough disaffected factions to attempt such a murder. Whether it was planned or not, the killer's sons were put to death, and Alexander executed 2 others he suspected of involvement. These unfortunates were thrown onto the funeral pyre alongside Philip and his regalia. As was the custom, the charred mud bricks from the base of the pyre were placed on top of the newly built tomb. A second chamber was added to the tomb after Philip's burial, revealed by this join in the plasterwork. Had it been built to receive another victim of Macedon's violent politics? When Andronikos entered it, he found even more riches. Inside were the remains of a woman's jewellery, like this gold-plated pectoral. There was more weaponry and armour. And lying among the decomposing remains on the floor, this crown of myrtle flowers. Inside the sarcophagus, he found a second golden larnax. It contained more bones, which were wrapped in a cloth of gold. And finally, there was another magnificent golden crown. The identification of the bones from this larnax presented Jonathan Musgrave with a difficult challenge, since they were so fragmented. The first priority was to prove conclusively the sex and age of the bones. He could then try to relate this information to the historical data about the characters involved in the political intrigues.
When one's trying to establish the sex of any skeleton, one uses a few diagnostic, or as many diagnostic pieces as one can. Among the limb bones, for example, we have both right and both left femoral heads, and the size of those does differ quite significantly between the sexes, and those, of course, fall into the female range, and we have other bones like the head of the humerus and so on. We're talking about a young woman in her early to mid-20s. The most likely is Cleopatra, who was Philip's last wife, who was murdered early in 335, 6 months after Philip's death, along with her baby. She was probably about 22 when she died, so she would be quite a strong candidate indeed. There is obviously the problem of the absence of baby bones, but that is not insuperable. She died under certainly hostile and tragic conditions, and her murderers or her enemies could very easily have, separated mother and child in death through vindictiveness.